Last week, someone left a note on my windshield, telling me never to park where I was parked again. I was on a public street, a spot that does not belong to anyone, a spot that every person in this neighborhood has the same legal right to use. I read the note, I processed it, and a week later I had no choice but to park there again. The next morning I walked out to my car and found oil poured all over it. This is that story, and everything I have learned about what you do when a neighbor decides that public property is theirs to control and is willing to go further than you ever expected to prove it. First, I want to give you the context because it matters. My neighborhood has a serious parking problem, not a minor inconvenience, a genuine daily challenge that affects almost everyone who lives here. There are several apartment complexes nearby. The housing situation in this area has led to more multi-generational households, more cars per property than the streets were ever designed to handle. So, street parking is not just difficult, it is competitive. You come home at the wrong time of day, and you are circling for 20 minutes looking for something within reasonable walking distance of your front door. Everyone who lives here knows this. Everyone has adapted to it. Most people, reasonably, accept that street parking is shared. It is public. It is first come, first served. That is how it works. My neighbor on the corner has a different philosophy. They have a corner property, which means there is street frontage on two sides, 4 spots along the public road that runs around their property, and they have been blocking all 4 of them with their trash cans, permanently. About a week and a half ago, I was struggling to find parking. I had been driving around for a while, and the options were running out. I came past my neighbor's corner property and saw the trash cans lined up along the curb the way they always are, blocking the spots, on a public street. I moved the cans, set them back on their property where they belonged, and parked. When I came back to my car, there was a note on my windshield. I'm not going to repeat the exact wording, but the message was clear. Do not park here again. I stood there on the street and read it twice, and I felt something that I think most reasonable people would feel in that moment, a kind of disbelief. Not anger yet, just genuine confusion at the audacity of someone telling you not to use a public street. I have lived in this neighborhood for a year. In that year, I have had 0 issues with any of my neighbors. Not one. I am not someone who looks for conflict. I am not someone who pushes buttons. I mind my business, and I expect others to mind theirs. But a note telling me not to park on a public road is not something I could simply accept, because the moment you accept it, you have handed someone authority over public space that they do not have and were never entitled to. And that's not a door I was willing to open. For a week, I managed to find other spots. Not because of the note, just circumstance. But last night, the situation was what it was. The neighborhood was packed. Every reasonable option was gone, and I ended up back on the same street, same corner, same trash cans blocking the same public spots. I sat in my car for a moment, thought about just driving around again, looking for something further away, avoiding the confrontation. And then I thought about the note, about what it was actually asking me to do. It was asking me to voluntarily give up access to public space because someone had decided it was theirs, with no legal basis, no agreement, no right. Just a note, and the assumption that it would be enough. I moved the trash cans back onto their property. I parked. I went inside. I walked out to my car the next morning and stopped. Oil poured across the hood, down the sides, over the roof, across the windshield. My car covered in it. I stood there on the sidewalk just looking at it. That specific kind of stillness that happens when your brain needs a moment to fully process what your eyes are seeing. Because it takes a second to accept that someone actually did this. That a neighbor, over a parking spot on a public street, did this to another person's vehicle. The anger came. But underneath it was something that felt more like a kind of sadness, that this is where we are, that this is what someone decided was a proportionate response to me moving their trash cans off a road they do not own, and was willing to go further than you ever expected to prove it. I took photos, everything I could document, the car, the oil, the area around it, and then I looked at the ground. There were oil drops on the street, not scattered, a trail, leading directly from where my car was parked to their front door. And on the corner of the street where their property sits, empty oil containers, left there, not even hidden, just left. I want you to understand what that means. This was not someone who was even trying to be subtle. This was someone who was so certain they were untouchable, so confident that nothing would happen to them, that they left the containers at the scene, feet from their own front door. That confidence told me more about this situation than the act did. 12:30, the police report. I went to file a police report. I explained what had happened. I described the note from the week before. I told them about the oil trail, the containers, the direction it all pointed. And I was told that without video evidence, without having witnessed it directly, there was nothing they could do. I understand how the law works. I understand what is and what is not actionable without direct evidence. But I want to be honest about what it feels like to stand there with photos of your damaged car, a trail of physical evidence pointing in one direction, and be told that nothing can be done. It feels like the person who did this was right to feel untouchable, because in that moment, they were. I filed the police report anyway, because documentation matters even when immediate action is not possible, because a paper trail exists now, because if this happens again, there is a record. I went to the property. There's a main house and what appears to be two smaller rental units behind it. I knocked. A man answered who I believed to be the property owner. I asked him, calmly, whether he knew anything about a note being left on my car when it was parked in front of his property. He told me he didn't understand me, that he didn't speak English. And then he closed the door. I'm not going to make assumptions about that interaction. I don't know for certain who left the note. I don't know for certain who poured the oil. It's possible I spoke to the wrong person. It's possible there is someone else on that property responsible for all of this. What I do know is that I have lived in this neighborhood for a year without a single issue. I know where this started. I know what it started over, and I know what the oil trail on the street said about where it all came from. I spent the rest of that day thinking carefully about my options, because reacting emotionally was not going to help me, and doing nothing was not going to help me. I reached out to my city's local code enforcement department because using trash cans to block public street parking spots is a violation. It's not a gray area. The street does not belong to them, and blocking public access to it is something that can be reported and addressed. I documented everything again. Photos of the car, photos of the oil containers, photos of the trash cans in the street before I moved them, the original note, all of it organized and dated. I filed the code enforcement complaint. I submitted everything I had to support the police report, even knowing immediate action was unlikely. And I reached out to a local tenants and residents legal aid resource to understand exactly what my options were regarding the vehicle damage. Because here's what I know about situations like this. The person who did this is counting on you to feel powerless. They left those containers in the open because they believe there are no consequences coming. The best response to that belief is to make sure they are wrong, quietly, methodically, through every legitimate avenue available to you until the weight of it becomes more than they bargained for. They poured oil on my car over a parking spot, a public parking spot, and I'm still here, still parking where I have every right to park, still documenting, still filing, still standing in the space that is legally mine to stand in. 21 emotional ending. There's something particularly violating about someone damaging what you own. Not because of the cost, not even because of the inconvenience, but because of what it communicates. It says, I can reach into your life and damage something that is yours, and there is nothing you can do about it. That message is designed to make you feel small, to make you feel like the path of least resistance is to simply comply. Park somewhere else. Don't move the trash cans. Don't take up space that someone has decided, with no authority, belongs to them. But here's what I've learned from this. The people who operate that way, who leave notes and then escalate when the notes don't work, they aren't actually powerful. They're people who have never faced a consequence, who have always found that aggression was enough to make others back down. And the most effective thing you can do is not match their aggression. It's to be more patient than they expect, more methodical than they expect, more willing to use every legitimate avenue available to you until the weight of it becomes more than they bargained for. They poured oil on my car over a parking spot, a public parking spot, and I'm still here, still parking where I have every right to park, still documenting, still filing, still standing in the space that is legally mine to stand in. Don't let anyone bully you out of what is already yours. Not with a note, not with trash cans on a public road, not with anything.